monde, ravi de vous accueillir pour ce nouvel épisode qui va un peu changer la donne puisque au lieu de débattre d'un sujet avec l'équipe, on va recevoir deux invités de marque pour discuter business et jeux vidéo, à savoir Alex Seropian, fondateur du studio Bungie, et Max Hoberman, fondateur de certaines Affinity. À l'avenir d'ailleurs, on va recevoir de plus en plus d'invités sur le podcast, notamment pour aborder des points précis de l'industrie du jeu vidéo. Alors si ça vous plaît et que ça vous intéresse, pensez à vous abonner à la chaîne ainsi qu'à mettre un pouce, ça aidera grandement l'émission. Et d'ailleurs, n'hésitez pas à nous dire en commentaire qui l'on pourra inviter et quel sujet on pourra aborder avec eux. Si vous préférez le format audio uniquement, sachez que cette émission est toujours disponible en priorité sur Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud et toutes les autres plateformes de diffusion. Cet épisode, il est divisé en trois parties, à savoir une première où on discute uniquement avec Max Hoberman, une seconde avec Alex Seropian qui nous rejoint, et enfin, je termine à discuter purement business avec Alex Seropian. Sur ces belles paroles, on va pouvoir commencer. Profitez-en bien. Hey Max! Thank you for joining us today. It's really a great pleasure to have you there. I think most of the people following us know who you are, but just in case, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. My name is Max Hoberman. I'm the CEO of Certain Affinity. We're a studio based out of Austin, Texas. We also have a second office location up in Toronto, but we're a very large indie, very large independent game developer. We do a lot of work on a lot of games and a lot of shooters in particular. So we do a lot of what we call co-development, although we're in the process of shifting more and more work to original game development, lead development. But in our history, God, we've been around for a long time. We've been around. I founded the company at the end of 2006. And in that time, I think we've probably worked on about 40 different independent, releases, full games that we contributed to, full games we developed in their entirety, co-development, post-release like DLC support, et cetera, et cetera. And I've lost track of how many of those were Halo games, but a lot. I think the very first, when I started the company, the very first thing we did was the Halo 2 Blastacular map pack. And then, all the way through many, many games and iterations, all the way through to work on Halo Infinite, even up till recently. So, yeah, among other things.
Thanks, Max. I think with this introduction, you already answered some of my question.
I anticipated that, yeah. So, lots of history with Halo, even history prior to founding Certain Affinity with Halo. So.
I'm just curious, is this your first time joining a French podcast?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, probably. I don't talk publicly very often. One of the downsides of doing co-development is, much of what we work is super confidential, top secret, and then we're not the publisher or the lead developer often, so we're not out there publicly talking about our work. So yeah, it's very rare that I talk publicly with anyone, especially anyone in France.
Oh, by the way, if you have some issue understanding my question, thanks to my terrible French accent, please tell me and I will repeat them in the right and better way.
So far, so good.
Actually, you were saying you don't speak publicly too often, and honestly, for a lot of people, especially designers, I think we would love to hear more about your experience and your wisdom regarding, game design and everything related.
No, I appreciate that. I think the reality is that since I started, before I started Certain Affinity, I was full-time designer and design, and lead. And after I founded Certain Affinity, I became a full-time businessman and a part-time developer, right? So I think what I can actually talk about, I try and keep what I talk about to things that I personally was hands-on involved with, work that I did personally. And it's very light touch on the development side since I founded Certain Affinity, right? Every once in a while I'll get involved or I'll roll up my sleeves. But it's pretty rare, although interestingly, right now, I don't know if you heard, I hired a really big name awesome guy, to be our president and chief operating officer, Paul Sams. He was the COO at Blizzard for about 20 years. We hired him, and I hired him to run the business side of the house last fall, so as to free me up to actually focus on leading our development efforts. So as part of that, I've actually been much more hands-on as the game director for a brand new original game that we're building a playable demo for, and we're going to be out pitching. I'll be in your neighborhood. I'm going to be at Gamescom behind closed doors pitching our game with a hands-on demo in Germany end of August. So yeah, much more involved in development. But yeah, going back to what you're saying, in since I wasn't able to talk about a lot of my old work, at some point I just decided I would start posting about it on Twitter, and I started posting old snippets from design documents. I'm sure you saw some of the old paper designs for maps and systems from Halo 2 and Halo 3. So yeah, I think there's actually a lot there over the past few years. I shared a ton there. So any old Halo related topic, multiplayer, online, UI topic you're interested in, if you look me up on Twitter and you search specifically in my tweets, you can probably find something. So
yeah, it's been so nice of you for sharing this design document. Today is more focused about the business aspect of video game, but would you be up to come back for another episode dedicated to game design?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I was hesitating because I was trying to think about whether there's anything that I can say that I haven't already said, because you mentioned the podcast that I did with Bravo, the Halo, what was it, Halo 2 Artifacts podcast, and I man, that was so in depth about stuff that I mean, if there's something you want to know more about and you find interesting, I'm happy to chat about it. I can't guarantee it isn't something I've already talked about, but sure, yeah.
Oh, you would be surprised that some of us still have some questions we can't find answer for yet, and especially for very little tiny details.
Ah, well, I know I appreciate that. I think we have a little bit of time before your other guest shows up, right? Um, so I'm gonna throw a design question my way, just real quick before we get into the business. I'm curious. Give me a sample.
Oh, actually, I would love to know your opinion about like innovation in the video game industry and how allowing anyone on the Xbox platform to get all the services you created for Halo 2 might have standardized the approach to online gaming. But actually, right now, I didn't note any in
All right,
particular.
putting you on the spot. You know. I'll tell you something then is sort of design related, tangential, distantly design related. So years ago, I did some classes here in Austin, which is my home city, which was a whole string of classes, which was comedy improv training. Have you ever seen improv or done improv classes?
Actually, before being a designer, I was comedian in the South of France for
Oh, there
many
we
years.
go. You know. Well, so what I was going to say, it's tangentially related because there's something about that sort of improv style, improvisational ideation, sort of problem solving ideation that I find is really, there's a lot in common, and it's a useful tool for problem solving in design. So I actually since I took all those classes, I've facilitated a couple sessions here or there for Certain Affinity where our staff and especially our designers basically can attend for free and learn some of the improv techniques, because I actually find the the process of sort of solving problems in a completely unfiltered way is something that I'm very good at, but most people are not. Most people self-censor and they self-filter, and they assume there's constraints on any given design problem that don't aren't necessarily real constraints. So I think there's something inherent in the improv, sort of, at least the comedy version of improv, the comedy improv training, that's actually really beneficial. And as a group, when you're brainstorming as a group, I find it's really useful. I think I already do it inherently, but it gave me some good tools to be able to work with others and do it in a more structured manner. So there's a little design tidbit for you, because since I'm on the spot asking you for improv, I'll get myself in trouble if I go too far down the design path, because, like I said, I'm only really getting back into development like the majority of my time since last fall. So I'm still dipping my toes in it anyway. So No worries.
Actually, when we first talked together, it was following a tweet you did where you said one advice you gave to people wanting to start a video game studio was to figure if they wanted to make a successful business or a video game, and that depending on the answer, the course of action might be very different.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm trying to remember that tweet. I think it was in response to somebody. I didn't just tweet that out of the blue. I think I was replying to someone, but I don't actually remember the specifics anymore of who I was replying to or why. I think there is this is actually a sort of I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but it's a strategy that I think I've always employed. It's everything comes back to prioritization, right? Um, you want to. We have a expression in the U.S. I don't know. You have a similar. I'm curious. Do you have a similar expression in French? We have an expression that says you can't have your cake and eat it too. Do you know that expression?
Yeah, in France, we have something like this. I don't know if it will translate well, but basically the saying goes as you can't have the butter, the money from the butter, and the woman doing the butter.
I like that even better. There you go. So it's the same concept, I think, and what it really speaks to in my mind, it really speaks to priorities, right? You can prioritize everything. You can prioritize having your cake. You can prioritize eating cake, eating butter, having the butter made, whatever whatever it is. You can have all of those things be priorities for you, but they can't all be equal priority, right? At some point, something is going to happen that's going to force you to prioritize one higher than the other, right? You can't say all of these things are my highest priority. Um, you have to have a metric that when push comes to shove, another expression we say here, when you are forced to choose between these things, even though you want them both, what how are you going to decide which you go with? And what I've always told people is if your if your primary motivation for starting a business is because you want to make your dream game, right? Or you have some idealized scenario about you want to make a game in this type of environment, or you want to make this specific game that you have a vision for and you're unwilling to compromise on that vision, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If that's your driving motivation and that is ultimately maintaining that privilege, being able to make your game whatever with no one telling you what to do, if that is your highest priority, um, then running a successful business is going to be lower priority, and there's going to come a point in time where you're forced to choose between those two things, right? Is it all about not compromising on my vision, or is it about what is higher priority, not compromising on my vision for the game or running a successful business? If not compromising on your vision for your game or whatever idealized scenario you have is your highest priority, well, then you're going to make decisions that cause your business to suffer, right? Um, so what I've always told people is if you're going to start a business, then running a successful business should be your highest priority, right? There are ways to make your dream game um, that don't have to, you don't have to compromise the business realities. You don't have to compromise the viability of the business in order to do it. So it's just for me, it's always felt like a very um, if you're going to start a business, then that should be your goal to make a successful business. And making your dream game, that's fine. That can be a secondary goal. That can be as we say in development, a P1, priority two, priority three. I'm sure you're familiar with that lexicon. That's fine. Making your dream game without compromise can still be your goal, but make that a P2 goal, not a P1 goal, right? Running a successful business should be your P1 goal. Um, Otherwise, ultimately, your dream of creating your own game or your own perfect scenario, it's going to fall apart anyway because your business is going to suffer. You're going to make decisions in order to maintain the integrity of your vision that are contrary to your business goals, your business is going to suffer, and that's going to have a cascade of consequences, which ultimately cause you to not be able to realize what you were prioritizing as your P1 goal. So prioritizing your business, if you do it successfully, that can enable you to do your dream game, right? If your business is successful, that can open doors and be an enabler that allows you to subsequently make your dream game and not have to compromise. But the order of operations matters, right? Yeah, it's messy, but I'm trying to rationalize it.
No, I think it's actually very clear. Like, to move forward with a project, it's important to focus on certain aspect and not to try to do all of them at the same time. Like, when you started certain Affinity, I think you were 30, something like this, right?
Yeah, 31. I was 31.
And did you already have this vision between making a game or making a successful business? Like, I think your first game at Certain Affinity was Age of Booty, and you also created the Mag Pack for Halo 2. And starting this journey as a support studio, I wonder what if it was like a planned strategy to be a support studio to gain experience, money, exposure, and reputation before going back to developing your own game? Or did you see the support aspect as a business opportunity and you oriented your studio in this way?
It was a complicated scenario when I started Certain Affinity, so I'm trying to think how to answer it, but it's very clear. I think that, when I started Certain Affinity, I was in fact setting out to do lead development on a very big, ambitious game, and a first-person shooter. Also, it wasn't Age of Booty that was the dream game, though I love Age of Booty. I had a lot of fun. That wasn't why I started Certain Affinity. I was, it's actually interesting to talk about it in the context of the choice between prioritizing business or your vision, because the reality is while I was still working for Bungie and Microsoft, while I was setting up Certain Affinity, and while I was negotiating with Microsoft to spin off and continue work on the Halo 2 map pack, et cetera, I was also putting the pieces in place to allow me to develop this dream game, if you will, right? And it was a sci-fi action RPG. Our code name, working title, was Babylon back then. So I had a lot of work that I put in, and that's when I was setting up Certain Affinity, but before I had really jumped, before I had committed fully, given notice and left, that process, some problems arose. I won't go into the details, but it was clear it wasn't going to work out the way I wanted, because I was also negotiating for rights to certain game engines and technology. And when that hit a roadblock and it became clear that wasn't going to happen, I had a choice I had to make. Do I give up on this idea, or do I continue, knowing that knowing that I'm not setting myself up to be able to do this game that I was very passionate about, very excited about right out the gate, right? That's going to be years down the road. And I made that decision very consciously, knowing that it was going to take a lot of time from the founding of Certain Affinity to building to the point where I could actually do that game. But my original plan gave me a huge head start, where I was going to be able to really hit the ground running on working on that game that I was very passionate about at the time. So yeah, I think I went in eyes wide open, knowing that I admit I was a little bit grumpy, unhappy with the way that things had transpired, and it kind of motivated me to say, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. But I wasn't naive. I knew that I was I knew that I was going down what was going to be a difficult path. Essentially, I had a plan, I had a master plan and a vision. And before I even technically left Bungie and Microsoft and founded Certain Affinity, my plan hit a roadblock, and I was forced to pivot before I even left. So I pivoted to a new business strategy, and went out and sought co-dev, and very quickly ended up signing up to do co-development on Left 4 Dead with Valve. along with we pitched an original game to Capcom, Age of Booty, and we were doing the Halo 2 map pack. So very, very quickly, we had our first year, 2007, our first full year. Very, very quickly, we had sort of pivoted from the original strategy to doing 2 co-dev projects and 1 original lead dev project. And I changed my strategy really from day one when we officially opened our doors. I was already telling my staff that we were on a 10-year plan. And when we were 10 years old as a company, we would be ready to do a really big, ambitious AAA, big budget action game shooter. Obviously, that's the core of what we do. So yeah, I had already pivoted, and then the game that we're pitching in the in end of August is it's not the same game. It's not the Babylon game that I was originally concepting years and years and years ago. It's something new and different, very different, but it's still a shooter. But it's not the original game. But the vision of being able to do lead development on a original IP and do some very novel, very creative, very unusual things never changed. It's just a very different approach 16 years later.
Yeah, pivoting seems to be the important word here. Like, basically, you soon face the fact that developing your own game, your dream game, I would say, might be more difficult than anticipated. And you recently hired Paul Sams, which is your chief operation officer, right?
President and COO.
All right. And as you're working on several projects as a support studio, for example, the team of about 100 of developers you have on the Halo project you talked about a few months ago, like how do you manage to split your resources to be both a support studio and working on your own game?
No, it's a good question. It's certainly challenging. We have 3 projects. Well, 3.1 I call it today. We have 3 big ones and 1 small one. One of them is a continued partnership with 343, which I can't go into the details on, and that's actually our biggest project today. One of them it's actually another totally unannounced relationship, co-development on something very big and very exciting that's brand new. It's an original IP that we're doing. We're doing co-development with them. That's a smaller team, maybe around 30, 35 people. And that's nothing about our relationship there is announced yet. That'll probably won't get announced until December, I would guess. But it's great. It's going really well. I'm very excited about it. And then we have a third and a very small 4th project that we're self-funding. And we've been self-funding this original game, building a playable prototype and a demo. I think we've been self-funding it since last fall, really since Gamescom last year. I came out of Gamescom last year and decided I'm going to do this and started putting the pieces in place and really sort of spun up the full development team, in maybe December. Yeah, we've been paying out of pocket for that. And it's just, you work hard. We try and be very responsible about, saving money and spending money. And then slowly you build up some, slowly you build up some savings. And then we're investing those savings in building this demo and building this original game. But we can't take it all away, right? Game at the scale that we're at, and even our people in the indie community will laugh because our self-funding a playable prototype, which maybe is sort of like a vertical slice, probably 30 people. Hey, Alex.
Allô, monsieur. Bonjour.
Hey, Alex. Thanks for joining us.
Can you hear me? Écoutez-moi.
Oh, you speak French. I didn't know about that.
I can't hear you. Hold on.
We can hear you, Alex, but you can't hear us. All right, while Alex gets his audio going, I'll finish. So we're essentially self-funding this, but we can't do that forever because we're slowly, spending our savings. So we have to go out and pitch it and find a partner, find someone to provide further funding, et cetera. So that it's a gamble, but no risk, no reward. So it's a chance we have to take. Hey, Alex, can you hear us now?
Yeah, sorry. I just barged right in and just stomped all over you, didn't I? I couldn't hear in my
No, it's fine.
headphones.
You barged in speaking French. I'm impressed.
Merci.
Well, Alex, Max, really happy to have you both on this podcast. I know you recorded together recently on the Fourth Curtain podcast, so I hope you don't mind being, well, reunited once again.
I can't stand being in the same room as Max. Forget it. I'm out of here. I'm kidding.
Wait a second.
I'm
Nobody told me
kidding. I
Alex
love
is
Max.
I gotta go. Alex came.
Look, we even
Came to
coordinated the
visit.
T-shirt. See?
Oh yeah. Alex just came to visit us in Austin. We just had dinner like a week or two ago. So he's lying when he says he can't. I think he can't quit me. It's the truth of it.
I can't stand to be away from Max. So this is great.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, really a big thanks to you both for joining our podcast today. You both have been very inspirational for a lot of people. Some of them who now works in the video game industry, we still learn from your experiences and the lessons you shared over the years. So yeah, just before we go further in this episode, I just wanted to thank you both for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for saying that. I'm glad. I'm glad you've enjoyed the games.
Alex, I don't know if you heard me say this, but I often say that I feel like prior to founding my own company, I really have had two mentors, and that was you and Jason in development, and you in business. So I wholeheartedly agree. I feel the same.
Well, you learn from the best. Right on.
That's right. Exactly.
Oh, and just before we move on to the business question, I just wanted to ask you, Mask, if you did work on the Doom 2016 multiplayer, because in our team, it's probably our favorite multiplayer from the past decade, and we wish we would have seen more
awesome.
of it.
No, it's awesome. I really appreciate it. That was that was an interesting one because we designed the multiplayer in its entirety. I didn't have a lot to do with it. I covered for our design lead when he was out of the office for an extended period or early on. But I remember I just asked him as he, going on a extended vacation, child related. I asked him up front what the sort of pillars were for his vision for multiplayer. And then I went and sort of stood in for him for a couple, maybe 2 months, actually going up, visiting with id, talking with them, and really promoting the foundation of what he wanted to do. And then he came back and he, it's like a baton. He took the baton in the relay race, and him and the rest of the team carried it forward. And honestly, outside of playtests every now and then, I had nothing else to do with it. But we have a great team at Certain Affinity, and I don't have to be hands-on involved in everything. So I appreciate that, though. I thought they did a great job.
Well, if you happen to see them after the recording, you can definitely tell them how good was the work they did on this multiplayer. It was truly a blast.
Oh, that's awesome. I will pass on the compliment. Yeah, thank you.
So, Alex, I was saying to Max earlier that the idea from the episode came from one of his tweets where he talked about the prioritization to make when creating a video game company. So my question to both of you from a business perspective and a designer as well, it's like, do you feel like it may be more important for someone wanting to create a video game studio to figure out a business model before figuring out the kind of game they wish to make?
Who wants to take that? Max, you want me to jump
in? That's all you, Alex. No, that's all you.
I like a lot of things in life. It depends. That tweet that Max did is rings really true to me because I do get that question a lot. I especially recently, we went through a studio closure at EA. Had a lot of really talented folks on our team. A lot of and Industrial Toys was was an independent studio before becoming part of EA. So a lot of kind of like entrepreneurial spirit there. So literally 6 or 7 people came to me after that and said, "Hey, I've got a game. What should I do? Should I start I'm going to start a studio, and it's two very different things, two very different endeavors. making a game and making a business. And you have to really want to run a business if you're going to start a business, because it's brutal. I think anybody who's been in business for any length of time can tell you that it's emotionally draining. It can be exceptionally lonely. It can be, I shouldn't make it sound horrible. It can be fantastically rewarding too, and you have your independence and you have control. Which, for narcissists like Max and I, that's what we crave, right? So in some ways, it's amazing, but it's very different from making a game, which is a creative endeavor, and sometimes the two, one enables the other, but sometimes they come in conflict, where there's something that's in service to the game that's not in service to the business, or vice versa, and navigating that can be really hard. So I think you're quite. I said a lot of stuff, but rewinding back to your question, your question was
actually, it's an excellent answer and a very honest one, I would say. I kind of asked this question to Max earlier in this episode, and I think both your answer resonated very well with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that I think yes. I mean, I would absolutely figure a business model before starting to make a game, because the two are inextricably linked. And I'm pretty sure. I mean, I can tell you that if you want to make a game when you say business model, if you mean things like, oh, is this going to be supported by a subscription, or is this going to be free to play, or is this going to be a $60 download? The design for those three games is very different. So you can't really just start off making a game and later go, oh, well, this, design a game like Halo and then go, oh, this should be free to play. It makes no sense. It wouldn't work. So the short answer to your question, I think, is yes. But if the real question is, how do you reconcile running a business and being creative and making a game? Every Max, I don't know if you guys work this way, but I've always had a partner. Sometimes, like, Jason was my creative partner. At my new company, I have a business partner, so I can do more of the creative. But having a partner where you can have a left brain and a right brain that can look at things at the same time is often really helpful. So, if you have a great game idea, but you don't know how to get it funded, or you don't know how to build a business around it, sometimes it's good to, partner up with somebody who's got that part under control, or vice versa,
I think that's good advice, Alex. I think the reality is that I did both of those roles for 15 plus years at Certain Affinity, and only since last fall do I have a business partner, so to speak. Now that I hired Paul Sands. So I like to say I followed your lead in some ways, but in others I didn't, because I've always been a weird hybrid between creative and design and development and business. And honestly, when I started Certain Affinity, I really didn't know very many people outside of Bungie. I knew exceptionally few people. Like in Austin, I knew 0 game developers when I started my company. So I went an extra difficult walked an extremely difficult path, bootstrap startup too. But I don't recommend it. Anyone following my footsteps, because it's been hard. It's been very, very difficult.
You're a rare talent, Max. I think you have you have skills in both of those areas, and I think your business sense is instinctive. You ask a lot of really good questions, and that's, I think, really important for like the business that we're in, making video games. It changes all the time, so there's no book to read.
Never read one.
Well, yeah, a lot of it's trial and error. A lot of it's experimentation and figuring out. A lot of it is asking the right questions.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because so much of what we do is, whether it's development or business, it's creative problem solving is how I look at it, right? And I certainly think of myself as a good creative problem solver, thinking outside the box, thinking holistically, strategically, and I feel like that's something you've always been really good at too, Alex. And I think there are some fundamental underlying skills that are like I remember when I was going to start Certain Affinity, and because it's bootstrap startup, that meant I was initially funding it out of my own bank account, right? And my wife insisted you have to have a business plan, but I didn't really know anything about making a business plan, so I just kind of made it up, checked the box. It was terrible. It was throwaway. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I checked the box.
Wait.
Like, okay, great.
Was your business plan like make game, sell game, make money? Was it
Profit
that like
is
those
always
three
the
bullet
final
points
step,
on
right?
there?
It was a little more. I think my business plan was my plan for the first 6 months of my business, and then I didn't really know how to take it beyond that.
That's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, a lot does come with instinct, right? To your point, good instincts matter a lot. So I don't know. I've survived. Surviving is nice. It's not everything I set out to do, but it's a start.
Well, I think that's one of the key instincts. Is you have to figure out a way to. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's like you get a barrage of challenges, in front of you constantly, and figuring out how to navigate that creative problem solving is you got to figure out a way to survive. And it's, the teams that figure that out are the ones that have longevity.
Yeah.
Actually, as an outsider of the industry, it feels like there is so many business model possible. It can be difficult to really dig into a direction or another. And you said earlier that someone might have to find a partner so the both can focus on different aspects. So for a creative person who would like to find a business partner, how would you recommend to do so? Like, I don't know, finding someone over LinkedIn or something like this?
I don't know about LinkedIn. Yeah, I think it's harder if you're creative. There are a lot of communities, so it depends on sort of where you're coming from. If you're in school, there's probably a community around your school, for like game development. And it's not like people with good business sense or people who are interested in the business behind video games don't hang out in those communities. They do, so that would be, those communities are the places I would probably look first. If you're a fan of a particular kind of game that has tools, and if you're starting by modding for those games, then I would look in those communities. Join the IGDA. That's another community. I don't know. That would be my suggestion. I guess if you're older and already in the industry, then you have a lot more access to folks. Network. I would say network like mad. Meet people. Introduce yourself. Get to know people. Tweet at people. Go to PAX, go to conferences, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was asking you this because it's probably one of the most questions we've been asked when we said that we were about to have you both on the podcast.
It's interesting. I mean, that's essentially what you did. It was pre-internet days with Bungie, but you found a partner at college, right, Alex? You and Jason met at University of Chicago.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of the early employees were like Greg was a classmate of ours. Dan Meltz was a classmate of ours. When we started hiring, beyond that sort of core group, we did, we were advertising in the Chicago Reader, which is sort of like the print version of Craigslist, I would say, back before the internet. But then, eventually we had our own community, and folks like Chris Barrett and Paul Bertone, like literally were playing our game, modding it, and came to us out of the community, and they became, hugely influential, and still are, in Bungie's games. So, yeah.
Yeah, actually, another question we've been asked a lot is, as you both created your own companies, like, which are the worst mistake you did, and that the people could learn from to not fall into the same error that you may have done?
I have one, but Max, I don't know if I don't want to just
No,
stomp all over. So go ahead.
I have so many I have to sort through. So go ahead and tell yours.
Well, all right. I mean, I'll just say right off the bat, the most important for me, I think the most important thing when you're building a company or a team, and the thing that's most challenging are the personal relationships. You know, who you work with is more important than, in my mind, than what you do. And we got pretty lucky in the early days, getting some really exceptional people in the door. But if I think back on hey, I would have done X differently, they're all how I've navigated challenging interpersonal relationships. Either somebody who I was trying to either motivate or to get to contribute in a certain way, but more often having a couple people on the team that were not able to collaborate, and either my ability or inability in this case, to figure out how to to coach and train and motivate those folks to be productive. And when it was clear that that wasn't going to happen, just being slow, this will sound a little touchy feely, but just being slow to correcting that. And usually what that means is there's I think a common business phrase about like hiring slow and firing fast, which sounds kind of crappy, but the reality is, if there's somebody in the mix that is bringing the entire team down, you sort of have to have that team view of what best for the team is, what the captain should make happen. And when I've been slow to do that, it's like, it's just like taking too long to go to the emergency room when something is wrong and the patient doesn't get better. And so that is, for me, that's always been the hardest thing, because I like people, and I'm a huge optimist, and I always feel like they're going to do great. They just need time.
Actually, in most of the vidoc we have seen over the year where you were talk about, Alex, everyone agreed to say that you had a very like familial approach to managing people and creating like a family mood within a company. So I think this is definitely the kind of advice I would have expected from someone like you. Like, I don't know if it's a compliment to say something like this, but from my point of view, it's definitely one.
No. I take it as a huge compliment, because I think culture, like I said, it's like who you work with, I think, is more important than what you do. And that's always been the thing that I focused on, is building, like a healthy team culture, and one where, people are just excited to work together. It's a team, it's like the job, the real project is the team, and you have a fantastic team. They take care of the game. So yeah, I would say the biggest mistakes that I've made have just been slow to fire a couple of folks that they just really shouldn't have been there in the first place. Probably my fault for hiring them. But and no, that sounds pretty mercenary, but that's
Yeah, I can think back to the Chicago Bungie days, Alex, and it's much easier when you're not the person responsible to be a little bit on the outside looking in. And I remember there were times, even right when you hired me, where I remember telling you, like, you're crazy. You should, that person's, I won't say who, but I remember saying once, they're going to put you out of business, and you should, yeah, like, so, but again, now that I've been in the driver's seat, it's so much more difficult. And I see this, I mean, you're not alone in this, Alex. I see this at so many companies. Because we partner with a lot of companies, right? And we do a lot of co-development. We partner with a lot of companies, and often they call us because things didn't work out exactly as they planned. Everything didn't go swimmingly, didn't go perfectly, but they're always hesitant, right? That very, very hesitant to move quickly. And sometimes it's easier from the outside looking in to see that there's a problem. And I suspect that that's where having good outside advisors probably comes in really helpful. Like I never set up a board of directors or advisory board or anything for Certain Affinity. And I think in that respect, I'm probably worse off for not having done that, because I didn't have those people who weren't so close to it looking over my shoulder, able to be more objective, able to be, to kind of lay it out there, the hard truths and whatnot. So I don't know if that impacted you, Alex, but because I've fallen prey to the same thing. Although I don't know if it's my worst mistake, but it's certainly up there, one of them.
Yeah, that's definitely an excellent analysis. I would even say maybe like a golden one.
I mean, I'll throw in another one for free, which is when we started Industrial Toys. The whole idea behind Industrial Toys was to make AAA mobile games, and nobody else was really doing this at the time. This was like when we started. Supercell wasn't even out. Like Heyday hadn't even come out yet, and we decided that we had a good idea and we were going to approach it like AAA game development, and we literally spent 2.5 plus probably almost 3 years building that first game. And we kind of we sort of all eggs this one basket. We know what we're doing. We're just going to crush this. And if I were to go back and I only bring this up because if anybody's listening, learn from this. Don't do that. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, first game, new team, first game, like it's so valuable to get the entire loop of shipping something under your belt and get that muscle memory. And even like, and it wasn't just new team, new game, new device, new platform, new audience, new business model. It's like, yeah, just squirt one out in 6 months and see all the shit you did wrong, and then try again. Your third one is probably going to be good. There's my advice for you there.
Well, thanks for the free advice, Alex. And like Max, before you leave us, as we only had 1 hour together, I just wanted to thank you once again for joining us. And I heard that you were writing a science fiction book called Extinction. So I hope that you'll be able to publish it very soon.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you. I love that. I've been so busy. I feel like I'm at a point now with the book that I need to go find a publisher and make it happen. But I've been so busy, I haven't done anything. If there's any publishers listening, reach out. But I get one of my employees, one of our directors, asked to read it the other day, and I was really happy because she read the entire book. It's 120,000 words, so it's not a short book. And she read the whole thing over a 3-day weekend and really enjoyed it. And we chatted all about it the other day. So it got me reinvigorated. I'm like, all right, I gotta make this happen. So thanks for mentioning that. But yeah, it's nice chatting. I apologize, I have to go. I have a call I have to get on, but we'll chat again. We'll talk again, I'm sure. And Alex, it's nice seeing you again, despite your earlier statements. Oh, and look, somehow I got out of having to talk about my biggest mistake, but the clock is ticking and I have to go. So.
No worries, Max. Like, we will definitely do another episode, just you and me, and we can talk about all this kind of thing in detail. Well, see you, Max, and thanks again for being with us.
All right, thank you. See you guys. Bye.
So, Alex, as we were talking with Max, I didn't do the presentation the right way. So, before we continue, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Right on. I'm Alex Seropian. I've been in the video game business for about 30 years. I founded 3 studios, Bungie, Wide Load, Industrial Toys. I've worked at 3 large publicly traded video game businesses, Disney, Microsoft, and Electronic Arts. And I'm currently the host of the Fourth Curtain podcast and working on some other various projects that are top secret.
So, as you mentioned, you created several companies from Bungie to Wide Load to Industrial Toys. And what we can see is that each of these companies were acquired. Bungie by Microsoft, Wide Load by Disney, Industrial Toys by EA. So I was curious to know if it was like the end game or the end goal for any smaller company in the video game market to be acquired by a bigger one.
That's a really good question, and I don't know what most companies' aspirations are. So, companies are usually started by a couple of people. So they're entrepreneurs, and and they want they want to start a business, and they want to start a business because a business generates money. So most people get into business to make money. It's not always the case. Some people get into business to enable a creative passion, and I think probably in a video game business that happens a little bit more than not. But this kind of goes back to the question you were asking before about if somebody that doesn't really know business, how should they get their game made? Sometimes the right answer is to go join a company that and work your way up until you're the game director. That sometimes is the right answer. But when people start a business, they do that either to enable this activity to make something they think the world needs, or to make money. And that either goes forever or there's an exit. And the exit is getting bought or going out of business or going public. So there's a few ways for the story to unfold. It could persist forever, it could go public, it could get bought, or it can go out of business. And most people don't want their company to go out of business. And going on forever that's a challenge. I think it's a real mental challenge I think it's a rare breed that's able to run that race that long. If outsized success comes, it becomes easier. But like I was saying before, running a business is often a journey that's filled with both triumph and struggle, and that's just mentally challenging to do forever. So if you take those two outliers off the table, like company's going out of business or it's going to go forever, then it sort of leaves going public or getting acquired. And going public is a really big deal. A company has to get to a certain scale to be able to enable that, and the job really changes. Getting bought, getting acquired is often a really good outcome that can enable, like companies go through these chapters, these growth stages. Getting acquired often is a way to accelerate the next step, and for the founders to be able to take a breath from that crazy race and to make some money. So in the case of Bungie, it was Jason and I were looking at what Microsoft was doing, and it was very clear to us, it was very clear to me, that this was an opportunity for us to go from this kind of scrappy independent company that was pretty successful, making really good stuff, go from that to getting on the biggest stage with the biggest company with the biggest marketing budget. And because a perfect storm brewed, that was actually the outcome. And that's super rare. And I've got no delusions that, any of that was, none of that was easy. And super thankful for the outcome that we had there. And same with, Wide Load Industrial Toys. They were both opportunities that were similar to that, just the most recent one going from being independent maker of free-to-play for mobile in a ocean that was getting more and more competitive. Joining forces with EA was a way for us to kind of ratchet up to the next level. So, do most companies look at getting bought? I don't know. But if you think about the variety of outcomes that are possible, getting acquired is often the one that makes is often the best case for an entrepreneur. Certainly better than going out of business.
Yeah, I can totally imagine, definitely. So actually, speaking of your companies, in 2006 you gave GDC talk where you shared your way of working at Wide Load, and it was mainly a studio focused on the game design and project management aspect of the game, where you would externalize most of the production to external partner. And we are in 2023 now, and I wanted to know if, what was your point of view after all this year about this way of producing game? I'm not sure if the question is clear enough, so tell me if it needs some precision. I would gladly have them.
Yeah. No, I understand the question. So here's it's actually I think it's actually it's a very good question. It's a very interesting question, because at the time when we started Wide Load, nobody was really doing nobody was doing production that way. And the reason why we started that way was because of my experience at Microsoft. Like the 3 years I was at Microsoft were the years that the Xbox came out and the Microsoft Game Studios was born, and a lot of projects were started. Not all of them got to the finish line, and because my boss at the time, Ed Fries, invited me and the other studio heads to have visibility into the slate, all the games that were getting made. I met a lot of these studios, and I met the producers at Microsoft working on them, and I saw the path, the journey that each of these games took, and I saw some common challenges that these teams had, where they went from a game concept with a few people to a deal with Microsoft, which involved funding. So they grew. A challenging deadline, so it's got to be done for the launch, or you got to be done for this quarter, or there's a movie. You didn't have so much in the movie category, but and so a crunch, big crunch, and then either the game came out, or in some cases it didn't come out, because Microsoft was placing a lot of bets, and some of them they were like, this one isn't working, or we tried 3 of these and we're just going to go with this one, whatever. Sometimes it was the developer was behind. Sometimes it was Microsoft didn't exactly know what they wanted. Sometimes whatever, and I saw all of that happen, and I realized that this was not a good business model for an independent developer, where a life cycle of a project was small to big to small. If you get a project canceled and you've got 50 people on staff, and time to prototype something new, it's not good to be feeding 50 people then. It's hard to stay in business that way. So that was very formative to me, seeing that. When I started Wide Load, I asked myself, how do other creative businesses solve this problem? Because this can't be the only place where this happens. And it turns out film and television production have been building against this challenge for decades. And so that was really the inspiration behind this core team approach, where the core team is big enough to do that conceptual and prototyping work, and will be consistent throughout the entire thing, and we'll just do all the projects that way. So I'm just describing the model that you were asking me about, and then when we would go into production, we would contractors, other studios, etc., would help us deliver all the work. It worked. I mean, we made our first game that way, and it was profitable from the first day it came out, and we continued operating that way through the acquisition by Disney and the completion of Guilty Party, which I think was probably the best game that we did at that studio, and was also really successful. So it did work, and what we have today, if you're like, I didn't let go of that. Industrial Toys operated that way. Industrial Toys operated that way when we were inside of Electronic Arts. A lot of studios at Electronic Arts actually already operate that way. A lot of studios in the industry already operate that way. And today we call it co-development. And if you look at, we were just talking to Max's studio is kind of on the flip side of that. When a team like the Call of Duty team, or the Halo team, or the the Doom team are like, hey, we're building this thing, and we need to scale, but we don't want to hire another 100 people. We can do co-development with Max's studio, and that's a double win.
Yeah, that's exactly why I wish to have you both on this episode. Like, with your experience, do you feel like this way of producing games help to reduce the cost? Like, is it cheaper to externalize the asset production and only focus your studio on the game design and the project management aspect?
Yeah, I mean that is how a lot of the industry works. It's scalable too. So sometimes it's a core team, sometimes there's a mainline team, which is a little larger. They're making, maybe they're making the campaign, or maybe they're making the multiplayer and they're co-developing for the other part. And that happens more and more today. And as the world gets smaller and smaller, like the internet allowed us to collaborate with teams all over the world. And when the pandemic happened and we all started working remotely, it was not just the internet, but the tools that have sprung up that have allowed just any team to work remotely to be even more effective at doing co-development. And it has. I think there some people are a little worried that jobs will get lost because jobs will go somewhere else to a cheaper location. But on the flip side, I think we're getting a lot more diversity of talent. So it's not just Americans making games for the world or whatever. There's development teams all over. And I think what we're about to see happen in Africa is really fascinating, where the technology is catching up, and we're starting to see game development studios get started in on the African continent. And I think we're gonna see yet another center of creativity contributing to our industry, which you don't see in other businesses.
Yeah, the African market is growing fast, and they have the ability to maybe not reproduce some of the mistakes that the US or the Occident did in this domain. I'm actually quite surprised that you get this vision as well, because like I don't know why, but I thought that the US wasn't really looking outside of their border for this kind of thing, at least in the video game industries.
Well, I mean, I look at it this way. It's like I am very bullish on the game industry, because it continues to the player base continues to expand. It wasn't that long ago where well, I mean, whatever, when Halo came out, you would look at where people were playing the game, and it's where the Xbox was, which was the US and the UK. And when mobile came out, it was like, oh my gosh, it was like Asia, way more. And today you look at, there's more gamers in India than anywhere. And tomorrow, you look at Brazil and you look at Africa, and it's so global. And it's not just where people are playing, it's where people are making as well. And that is, I think, just gonna like another step change of how, like, where this industry goes. It's pretty exciting, I think.
Speaking of new market, it's a good transition to move on from wide load and talk about industrial toys, which was there more focused on the mobile gaming. If I'm not mistaken, you took about 2.5 years to create your first game. And I was curious if you felt like it was maybe a bit too long for a mobile game, and if you would do things differently if you had to do it once again.
Well, all right. So that there's a lot to unpack in that question. Yes, it was a long time. I think it was a particularly no. I mean, can you hear my dog? It's okay. All right. There's probably somebody outside. He's excited. But yes, 2.5 years, a long time for a mobile game. Maybe not today, but back then, yes. For our first game, double yes. For our first game, where there were so many things that we hadn't done yet, triple yes. Today, though, I mean, I think if you were to go off and go, all right, I've got a market segment or a game idea here that I think is a winner, and it's mobile, and I'm going to go and compete with the top 100. 2 years is not, I don't think that'd be out of line if you're talking about kind of AAA quality mobile game. That said, it's really hard to sort of that's really hard to do. It's really hard to do, and it's really hard to sort of get the investment conviction behind delivering that. I mean, and that's exactly what we went through, at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, when at EA, and we were kind of looking at the bar, to hit, to be competitive with mobile FPS, and the time and the investment to get there. and whether it made sense, you know. And ultimately, a giant big company with seemingly all the resources in the world decided it's not. We don't want to do that. We want to treat mobile like, you know, it's another platform for people to play the, you know, the one game. We don't need to make something different over here. So you know, I guess, you know, and the answer to your question is like, you know, was that too long? Yeah, I would say back then it was too long. Today, I might even say it might not even be long enough. It really depends, you know.
Yeah, I see. Oh, and by the way, like I hope you didn't feel offended by me asking this question. It was not at all in a negative way.
Oh no, 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 don't, you know, we're all learning machines here, right? So like what, you know, what we do along the way, if we're not learning from it, then you know, then, or whatever, we should be learning from it. So it's all good.
If I remember correctly, your first game at Industrial Toys, it was a free to play, right?
Yes, it was free to play.
Yeah, asking, as in your podcast, The Fourth Curtain, your co host Aaron said something about your game missing some hooks for the player. And hooks, as a gameplay mechanic, are often seen as like dark patterns made to trick the players into spending more time and money into a game. But it feels like that in the mobile industry, unless you do like a traditional game, you cannot really do and compete without them. So my question was, do you feel like hooks are a necessary evil, or can we design ethical free to play with a fair monetization as of today?
Uh, it, it, it's a really good question. I mean, if you go back all the way to the beginning of the game industry, like not all the way to the beginning, but to the early days, like the early days of the PC uh, game business, we started with shareware. Shareware was the original free to play. You know, you could download or you can get the first level, few levels for free. It was the demo, and if you liked it, then you gave some money and you got more. And then it evolved to DLC, and those were all transactional business models of I'm going to pay for something that I want. You gave me something for free first, but I'm paying as I go, and I think that seems totally fine to me. On the other end of the spectrum, you know, you could get some fairly um, opaque and usury systems that manipulate player behavior and you know, change the rules of engagement along the way that, you know, incentivize people to pay in situations that don't really seem fair to me. And so that's a spectrum. Is it possible to do free to play in an ethical way? Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think the bigger, you know, the companies are sort of learning that, and you ultimately you have to treat your players uh, well and respect your players and give them value if you want them to come back. So I, I you know, maybe it's a little virtuous to think that the market will learn. You know,
Yeah, it's kind of a broad question, which probably cannot be answered in a few minutes. And well, I hope you don't feel like it's a trap question because it didn't in any means.
No, I don't think it's a trick question. And it's my honest answer is I do think it's there. It is a spectrum. There's no, you know, the business model of paid download is fairly straightforward. You pay a price, you download a thing. Uh, the business model of free to play is there's 1,000 different ways that works. Some of them are ethical, some of them are not.
So, could we resume this by saying it is the intention behind the design and a design strategy which make it ethical or not at all?
Yeah, I mean, you can ask the same question about like Facebook. You know, is Facebook an ethical platform? You know, like how they treat your data, how they treat, you know, people's data, and how they monetize it. I think a lot of people, myself included, decided they didn't want to be part of that ecosystem. And you know, there's there's different platforms that work different ways, so it is it is a challenge, especially as technology gets more sophisticated and the introduction of AI and all of that. It is I don't know if like consumers will be able to keep up with the technology to sort of police companies to doing the right thing, because the technology changes so fast and it can be so opaque, and it's like people don't even know what's going on. How is the market going to police itself with the dollars? That was really the hope of capitalism, was like, people will vote with their money. And if you're doing something good, well, you'll make money. And if you're doing something bad, well, then you'll go out of business. But I don't know if that really is true. I think that's kind of an idealistic view. And I'm not saying I don't believe in capitalism. I do, but I think it's going to get a little tricky here before it gets better, especially with AI. Yeah, it's a good question.
Oh, I think we don't have much time left. Like, how much do you have on your side?
I could go 10 minutes over.
So maybe a last question before talking about your podcast, The Fourth Curtain. So recently, Industrial Toys, which was acquired by EA to work on the Battlefield mobile, was closed. As the studio founder, I wondered how you felt about it, and if it affected your morale and your ambition for your next project.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be honest. That really sucked. I mean, we spent we spent 10 years building that business, 6 years independently, and the reason we did that deal was to elevate the business, to get access to capital, to get access to markets that we couldn't access on our own, and IP as well, to help accelerate interest in our games, because free to play is all about acquiring customers, building that community. And we spent quite a bit of time going after that goal with Battlefield. And in the course of the last 12 months, just a lot of things didn't go the way, saying sometimes this happens, a lot of things didn't go right. Battlefield 2042 came out, and it was fans didn't really like it. EA did a deal with Tencent for their other mobile shooter, Apex, and that came out and kind of underperformed. Apple changed the privacy rules on their platform, so things got quite a bit more expensive. So just over the course of 12 months, like a bunch of things happened that just we had no control over, and it was what the market, and we on us to navigate those challenges, and we just were not able to thread that needle in a way that we thought would work for our players, for the studio, and for EA. So it was, nobody wanted that outcome, least of all myself. But I mean, those things happen, and absolutely no ill will. I have a lot of respect for the folks that are running the business at EA. They're making really, really hard choices, and still figuring out a way to thrive in what has become a very competitive business. And for me personally, I went through a lot of questioning and emotions, because we had a pretty sizable team, and a lot of my best friends, in that studio, and in a lot of ways I felt like I let them down. But on the flip side, I mean, I think you could probably tell I am an entrepreneur at heart. I do value my independence, and I'd love to build things. So 6 months out, I kind of am looking back at that experience, remembering the good parts and the motivation to go and try and do some good, try to give something back. And that's really the whole motivation behind the podcast was, I've gotten to meet so many amazing people in this industry. Maybe there's something that I can do to kind of connect that with giving something back to the community, the folks that are coming up today. I used to teach at DePaul University and Art Center here in LA, and podcasting is not teaching, but it is really sharing my experience and helping other people share theirs. So I don't think I would have been able to do that if we didn't have the unfortunate outcome there, and I have a few other things that I'm starting up as well. So I think your question was, how did that affect me personally? It was a very, very challenging outcome with a lot of emotion around it, but I'm pretty confident in a little bit it will have enabled some good things to happen. So, and I know a lot of folks on the team are off to like really exciting things too. So I'm very, very excited for all of them.
And to end on a positive note, if the people listening to us right now had a question that they would love to ask you about, do you do some, I don't know, consulting, or where can they get in touch with you?
I love sharing what I know. If anybody wants to, hit me up for advice. Your mileage may vary; just sort of depends on how busy things are. But you can always find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a note, and I'll try to be helpful.
So yeah, before we leave, I just wanted to say how great your podcast is. Like I said, it's called The Fourth Curtain, and you talk about the makery in the video game industry with excellent guests. Like for example, you had people like Randy Pitchford, Cliff Bleszinski, Max Hoberman, and Matthew Donnell recently. And I'm curious, like, is it like your next professional project?
Well, we'll see. That's my plan, to keep doing this for as long as I can convince people I know to come join me for some conversations. Probably won't be my full-time job. There isn't really there's not really a lot of money in it, or any. We're not doing advertising or anything like that. It really is a passion project, of ours. And but yeah, I love it. I mean, honestly, if I could keep doing this forever, I would. I do love it. I love the format. I love the fact that it's we can make something every week, and I love getting to talk to some folks I know very well. Some folks, it's the first time I've ever meeting them. Like we had Edmund McMillan on last week. What a cool cat that guy is! I never met him before, and it's a really great way to get to know people. So everybody's been great.
Well, honestly, it's really a pleasure to listen to your episode. So keep continuing it as much as you can, please. It's a real delight.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I very, very much appreciate it.
Well, it was a real pleasure to have you on this podcast, Alex. Thanks again.
All good. Très bien, mon ami. Merci.
Well, have a good day, Alex. And just to know, like, would you be up to come talk with us once again in the future?
Sure. Yeah. You let me know. I'll be there. Bye bye.
Et c'est terminé pour cette première entrevue, la première d'une longue série à venir. Si vous avez apprécié, n'hésitez surtout pas à nous le dire en commentaire. Abonnez-vous à la chaîne, mettez un pouce en l'air. Bref, vous connaissez la chanson sur YouTube, je ne vais pas vous la refaire. En tout cas, nous, on se retrouve rapidement, j'espère, pour un nouvel épisode. Et d'ici là, écoutez, passez un excellent été. Passez de bonnes vacances si c'est le cas. Moi, je vous dis ciao tout le monde, bisous et à la prochaine.
Game over.